It is just after 6 p.m. here on Sunday, April the 16th, and I decided it is high time to give you guys an update on our front yard farm. So about 2 weeks ago at our local farmers market, someone was asking me how our front yard farm was coming along. And I had thought to myself, I've been posting updates, but then I realized I had been posting updates primarily a little bit on Facebook, but primarily on TikTok. So I figured today would be as good a day as any, especially with the flowers blooming as they are, to give an update on how our front yard farm is progressing. So as I was scrolling through YouTube to see when our last update was, I realized that our last front yard farm update was actually about 10 months ago was the last time that we updated YouTube on how our front yard farm was coming along. And at that point in time, we had just been a couple of months past applying for the New Mexico Department of Agriculture Healthy Soil Grant. And our original plan at the time was to use that grant funding to be able to build a pollinator habitat here in our front yard farm. Unfortunately, we didn't receive the grant, so we kind of postponed our plans to get that completed, simply just because the cost of things. So, it was last year when a lot of building materials, the cost of a lot of building materials was still pretty high. So we kind of postponed things, and then at the same time, our schedules just got super busy. So we didn't actually get a whole lot done last year. Had we gotten the grant, the project would have been from August, would have started in August and then been completed by spring of this year. And so our timeline right now is more like it's spring, and we're probably about 40% of the way done with our second set of garden beds. So last year, whenever we first introduced you guys to what we were doing with our front yard farm, we had our first section. So our front yard is divided in 3 separate sections. And in this first section, we had completed 2 of our raised beds. They're brick around the outside. So we have 4 total raised beds now in our first section, which I'll show you guys a closer look at that here in a second. And then in the second section, we pretty much just, what we did was went on to Facebook Marketplace and we said, hey, we have a ton of these landscaping rocks. If anybody wants to come get them for free, all you have to do is haul them away yourself. And so there was a really great family who came and hauled away a majority of the rocks. They wanted to redo their yard, and so it was mutually beneficial. They needed landscaping rock and we needed the landscaping rock gone, and so it worked out great. So then the middle section has now been completely cleared of the landscaping rock, and we have 4 more raised beds in that area. The ones in the middle section are made from wood, and then the cement garden ends. And so I'll show you guys. I want to say the measurements are 6 feet by 6 feet square raised beds. And then in the third section, which is almost fully shaded, we want to do even taller raised beds. I think we want to do metal, and so that we can do hugelkultur in the bottom and fill them with unfinished compost, and then do garden soil and homemade soil, just the top few inches. And then we want to do leafy greens, because that area is almost fully shaded by a mulberry tree. So I'll give you guys a closer look at that as well, and then also show you what we're doing with a garden bed that runs parallel to these that I'm sitting in front of right now. So I can't believe it's been 10 months since I've given you guys an update. I'm glad that we've made some progress, although the project is not complete. When is the garden ever really fully complete? It's almost always changing. So I can't say that I'm dissatisfied or upset or disappointed, because we had it in our hearts to get this done, and we'll get it done even if the timeline is not what we originally planned. So I can't wait to show you guys what we have done here in our front yard farm. Let's take a closer look and let's take a tour. this garden bed being at the front of our house on a main street in our city. Sometimes it's kind of weird sitting here in my front yard talking to a camera, but okay, let's take a closer look. I'm going to give you guys a full overview of how our front yard garden beds look, and then I'll give you like some details about what is planted in each bed and then what our plans are for the future. Okay, so in this very first garden bed, this is what I was talking about when I was saying they're lined in brick. We just got these bricks from Home Depot. They're like 40 cents a piece. And then at one point they went on sale for like 25 cents a piece. And then we got a few more to finish out. But here in this first section, we have this 1, 2, 3, and then 4. So we have 4 of these rectangular garden beds. And I want to say these are about 3 feet wide and either 10 or 12 feet long. But here we have some snapdragons, which these perennialized for me, and they came back this year, and they came back so full and just so full of so many more blooms than what they had last year. Last year I didn't get them planted until it was pretty warm out, and that can make snapdragons struggle a little bit. But now here at the beginning of spring, they're just really nice and full. And then I wanted to show you guys this today because I'm going to go through and deadhead most of these pink ones tomorrow, and then cut some of these longer white ones for flower jars. And then this really pretty one I wanted to give you guys a close-up of. I don't know what this is called, but these ones are so pretty. They have like this light pink frilliness here at the tip with a light yellow, and then the throat is more white. So you can see they're more white towards the back of the flower. I just think these ones are so pretty. Here we have some Shasta daisies. These were originally over there, and they struggled a lot being in this area, in that raised bed, so I moved them down, and they struggled a little bit once I first moved them down, but they're starting to bounce back. And then I planted some dill, 2 patches of dill right towards the back of that bed. And then these are hollyhocks. If you go back and watch our very first front yard farm update that I posted in June of last year, I'll try to link it in the description. These are just so much more massive as compared to last year. And these are hollyhocks. They're light pink. They've put on buds, so they should be blooming in the next couple months or so. But they're almost as tall as I am, and I am 5'1". We'll take a look at this second bed, where we have all of these rocks here in the center of the path. We were utilizing them because it's what we had on hand, but we've decided to get rid of these as well. We purchased a wood chipper at the end of last year, so we're going to end up chipping wood and putting the wood chips in these pathways. So in this second bed, there's a bunch of daffodils. The variety is replete, and they're pretty much done for the season. There's just a couple more that haven't bloomed fully, but I've been picking them over the last several weeks and selling them from my porch. I call it porch petals or flower Fridays. So we've been doing that for a few weeks now. And then on the other side of the cattle panel are red cherry tomatoes, which I planted probably 2 weeks ago. Maybe a week and a half to 2 weeks ago. These are red cherry tomatoes along this cattle panel, and we're gonna let them grow up the cattle panel and just clip them or tie them to this panel as they grow up. And we're gonna just run them on a 1 or 2 liter system. That's a volunteer sunflower. Last year, this front yard farm tour was only about 7 minutes long because we only had 2 garden beds. So I'm eager to see how much more in length this second update is. You can see that we mulched with shredded paper. It's not super pretty looking, but it keeps the soil protected and it keeps the moisture in the soil, which is definitely necessary. The soil here in our front yard, it's not horrible because it's been covered with landscape fabric for the past several years. So it's not horrible, but it's really lacking in organic matter and can have some issues with moisture retention. Along this side, these are sun gold cherry tomatoes, and these are my absolute favorite cherry tomatoes to grow. These and Berry's Crazy Cherry are so fun for me to grow because the harvest is so plentiful and the plants are pretty disease resistant, so I didn't really have any issues with them, and they're very fast growers. We are going to trellis these sun gold cherry tomatoes up this cattle panel trellis, just like we're doing the red cherry tomatoes there on the other side. And so you guys can see my husband has spent many hours shredding paperboard, and cardboard for us to use as mulch, and then some friends also dropped by shredded paper as well. These are lilies that I planted fall of last year, and when I got them they were already sprouted, which means they were the previous year's lilies, but that's okay. I was gonna be disappointed if they didn't sprout this year because of the fact that when I put them in the ground they were already sprouted and then they died back, but I'm really happy to see that they've all come up. I can't remember how many I put here, but they look like they've all come up. I have no idea what these are gonna look like. I think I got a mix. Yeah, I cannot remember what kind I got. I just know that they were on sale, and so I ordered, like, I want to say I ordered at least 50. I have some in our backyard as well. So those are lilies, and I'm excited to see how those bloom out. I'll definitely be sure to show you guys once they start blooming. I will be using them for cut flowers, so I'm not going to really leave the blooms in the garden, but I probably will do an update so you guys can see at least 1 or 2 of the blooms. And then across from the lilies we have our sweet peas, and on either side of the sweet peas these were daffodils, more replete there going along that side, and then more replete going along this side. I'm sure that by this point I have hundreds of daffodils in our gardens, and I absolutely love that, and I love the fact that daffodils multiply year after year, so we'll continue to get hundreds and hundreds more. And over the years I do plan on digging them up and then just kind of spreading them throughout our gardens. I love the way that these sweet peas look. I've cut these sweet peas every day for the last 3 days, and you can see they're still putting off lots and lots more flowers. So I'm gonna cut them again tomorrow morning. I'm gonna rest the rest of the day, or I'll be editing this video for the rest of the day probably, and then just rest. The thing about sweet peas is that you definitely really do have to cut them almost every day, or at least multiple times a week, because of how quickly they put out flowers, and then how quickly the flowers can go to seed. So yep, I'll be clipping these tomorrow, and I also need to take some twine and trellis it from one side to the other to kind of help keep them up against the cattle panel so they don't fall down. So this is the second portion of our garden that I was talking about. You can see the original dividing line was about here, and then you can see there's still the metal barrier back there that divides it from the third portion. So that's what the third portion is looking like. You can see there's still some rocks, still some landscape fabric, lots of fallen pollen from that mulberry tree, and then some weeds as well. So you can see we need to pull up this landscape fabric over there, and then the cardboard has it's been kind of wind blown, but this is how things are looking. I didn't zhuzh it up for the video. This is how it's really looking. But we did these 4 raised beds. Everything in this bed is actually a volunteer. We filled the bottom of the beds with some unfinished compost, and you can see some stuff has come up in some of these. Those are all volunteers except for what you see over here. In this first square raised bed are 4 rows of sunflowers. I had planted okra back there, but it all died because I put it out too soon and then it frosted overnight. And then similar story with these bush green beans. I put them out a little bit too soon, and then when it frosted, it killed a bunch of them back. Sunflowers are half hardy, so they can actually take temperatures down to 32, 31, 30 degrees for a couple nights in a row, and they're fine. And so these ones are okay. But the thing about this soil here at the front yard, and it being bagged garden and potting soil, is it's a little bit hydrophobic. So a lot of the moisture is running straight through and is not actually being held there unless there's plenty of roots and mulch. Sorry if you guys are having a hard time hearing what I'm saying. Lots of cars driving by this evening. But I'm gonna come through and just direct seed some green beans here on this edge of the bed, and then I'll probably end up putting some squash plants there, and then I'll probably direct seed some zinnia flowers towards the front of that garden bed. I would really like to fill these back 2 beds maybe with some watermelon plants, and then the remainder space being zinnias. I just want to have a huge show of cut flowers here at the front. I believe this little bunch of volunteers is tomatoes. There's what looks to be some type of zucchini there and there, and you can see some of the cardboard, toilet paper rolls and paper and stuff like that that was in our compost. This is the wood chip pathway that my husband has been working on. We still have a lot of ground to cover, pun intended. But yeah, so all this area is going to be wood chipped. It's going to be wood chipped back here, and those pathways on that side will eventually be wood chipped as well. Over in this, I decided to go ahead and mulch up some of these volunteers, especially because they were growing so well. I didn't want to lose them. I have no idea what they are. This is either some kind of pumpkin that someone donated to us for our compost pile, a zucchini, or pink banana squash, because I know all of those were in our compost. And same for these over here. All of these are volunteers. And I do believe that these little bunches of volunteers are actually tomato plants. And I'm kind of going back and forth on whether or not I should leave maybe 1 or 2 in there to kind of just vine out. I don't know. I'm going to give them a little bit more time, but you guys can see how dry this soil is. So I'm going to water this first thing tomorrow because it's just so dry. The fact that this soil is so dry, but there's volunteers coming up, whatever I do grow here, I think is just going to be very heat tolerant and very drought tolerant, because of the fact that this soil loses moisture so quickly. But then in the areas that I mulched, you can see it's a little bit darker, a little bit damper, but not by much. So there's more of those squash there, over there. And then the ones that I notice are starting to struggle, I'm actually just gonna pull them out. So this is another one of those volunteer tomato plants. I believe these are all little tomatoes. I'm gonna leave those and just see what they'll do. And then this is a volunteer sunflower. This is just a look at this side of the garden. It still has the landscape fabric. You can see this mulberry tree is pretty low hanging, so we do need to get it pruned back so that way we can grow stuff over there. I think we might want to put maybe like a picnic table over there, and then we'll put some taller maybe circular raised beds along this area to grow in leafy greens. This is how the full front yard farm is looking from this direction. Just wanted to quickly show you guys what we have here at the front, or at the top garden bed area. These were all daffodils that I've harvested over this spring season. They're done for the season, and I think what I'm going to end up planting in between here, I may end up planting zinnias or maybe marigolds, something to just hide the foliage of these daffodils as they die back. And then there towards the back, there's some dill that self-seeded, and then there's more dill right along there that I seeded shortly after I started seeing that dill come up. So yeah, this garden bed faces parallel to these. So here are those. So there you have it. That is how our front yard farm is currently progressing. And I'll probably be back within the next 2 months to give you guys an update. I'll probably end up waiting until these 4 beds are fully planted, and then that way I can give you guys a little bit of an update about what we end up planting in those 4 beds. So yeah, until then, keep learning and keep growing.